Hello friends, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to like and subscribe as it greatly helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. Enjoy!
Welcome everyone for another fantastic episode of A Social Inquiry. Very excited today to have a great friend and really nice person all around. Helped me out a lot when I was a student trying to learn the ropes and get acquainted, and taught me a lot about homicide and all sorts of other fun facts when it comes to criminology. So our guest today is, in fact, retired homicide Seattle police detective Cloyd Steiger. Cloyd, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, no problem at all.
So Cloyd is also an author. I've read one of your books. I haven't read the most recent. And are you working on a third? Do you want to talk about those?
Well, I am working on a third, although I have so much stuff interfering with it. It's kind of a slog right now.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's okay.
No.
Yeah, that's all right.
And for those, I'm just going to do a quick screen share so you can see them. These are the two books, Homicide, The View from Inside the Yellow Tape, pardon me, and Seattle's Forgotten Serial Killer, Gary Gene Grant. So I'm going to post these. They'll be down in the comments with Amazon links, all that. So y'all be sure to check them out. Right. It's always fantastic. Got some articles I can give some shout out to from my guests. So, all right. So today is a very exciting episode, as well as for my students, because you will have to be watching this later in class. So lucky you. We're going to be talking about some domestic, in a sense, terrorism, as well as this, a serial killer, Ali Mohammad Brown, who, Detective Steiger here has had a lot of experience in dealing with and can enlighten us. And before we get all that, I'd, love to get some background for the audience, just about your service in, Seattle PD and, kind of what drew you into law enforcement.
Well, what drew me into life, when I decided I wanted to be a police officer when I was like 10 years old, right? So because I went from just watching TV shows like Adam 12 and stuff, I thought that looks like a cool job. And then I just, stayed with it. I read all the nonfiction books I could on how to do this. And by the time I got to be a teenager, I started reading more true crime stuff. And I thought, maybe I'd like to be a detective and maybe a homicide detective in my career. And that's what I did. So I got hired by the Seattle Police Department right on my 21st birthday in 1979. And I worked there for 36 years. I became a detective for the first time in February of 1990. I first worked a precinct detective job for about 2 years. And then which was, generally a lot of thefts and local, small time stuff. And then I became, I had an opportunity to work sex crimes, which was a unit downtown, a citywide unit at headquarters. So I jumped on that because I thought that was, I was trying to direct my path to make myself eligible for homicide. And so I did that, investigating rapes and child molests and things like that for 2 more years. And then in 1994, I went to the homicide unit and became a detective there. And I stayed there till I retired in 2016. So 22 years in homicide.
Geez. Well, on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service. That's quite the career. And it's kind of, I like the fact, and I don't know if all detectives have to go through this. I'm not as familiar with kind of, climbing through the ranks, at least as far as, jumping from detective to homicide detective. I think a lot of people are just under the assumption that you're a homicide, you walk the what was it, the beat, as it were, like, and then you just jump, you can jump up to homicide detective, kind of like what they show on all the shows.
That's not how it works. Although I used to tell people when I was interrogating them, I'd say, I just came in here the office last Friday and said, "You guys hiring homicide detectives?" And they said, "Yeah." So here I am. You're my first case, because when they're trying to, it sounds like kind of stupid and lying to me like I would buy it. So, but yeah, that's not the way it works. A lot of people, you gotta work your way up the food chain, and it's a very competitive place to work in homicide. So there are thousands of people on the police department, and hundreds of detectives, but only like 30 homicide detectives, right, in Seattle anyway. And so you got to work your way up. You got to do good work where you get noticed for doing good work and going the extra mile in all your cases, and then eventually, apply or try to get into homicide. But it's not an easy task. But the whole time I was aiming to that, I knew in the back of my mind there's a possibility I may never work in homicide, but it just kind of fell in my lap, actually. Everything just happened to be in the right space. When I was working sex crimes, it was the office right next door to homicide. So I was around all the time, and they would see me bringing people in handcuffs and making arrests. And they actually came to me and said, "Are you interested in working in homicide?" I said, "Yes, I am." The next thing you know, I was in homicide. So.
Oh, wow. So, okay. I mean, I think it's useful for people to know, right? Because there's just this huge misconception on how one climbs the proverbial ladder, if you will. Because I did a Citizens Police Academy, which I do suggest to many viewers. Like, it's not too long. It's like, meeting once a week. And that's actually something they went through, is like, at least in the San Antonio Police Department, there are a set number of positions allotted for each, sergeant, detective.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So our even when I did my ride along, my guy was telling me, super nice guy, Oliver. He's like, half of it's just a waiting game, and then it's luck. So okay, fantastic. Can you say, were there any major, pros or cons you want to quickly touch on with regards to, homicide or sex crime or any of the positions you worked?
Well, yeah, of course, there's in sex crimes, the pros and cons are more obvious. First of all, it's a sweatshop. There's so much work, and you have so many cases, and of course, you got to deal with child molest cases, which are not easy, and adult rape cases. And then, it's like I realized that I was getting ready to leave sex crimes when people would tell me all these terrible things they did to children, and it didn't affect me at all because I'd heard it so many times that I just said, some people stay there for years, but then I got the opportunity. It was never my goal to stay in sex crimes. That was a stepping stone for me. So, but it was, I learned a lot there. And then went to homicide. Now the homicide thing, well, the pros are you're at the top of the food chain. You pretty much can get anything you want to do. I could come and go any time of the day. No one would ask me where I was going or what I was doing, because as long as I produced, and I was. And they don't have people in. If you're not self-motivated, you're not going to make it to homicide, right? You got to be self-motivated and not wait for people to tell you what to do, and not ask your supervisor if you can do something. You just do it. But the downside is my phone could ring at 1:30 in the morning, and I have to get up, get dressed, go out the door, and drive to work to a scene, and I might not get home again for 30 hours. That's the downside. That's the way it is sometimes. It's just like, there's a lot of sleep deprivation, and riding by the seat of your pants sometimes. But on a weird way, that was fun too, because it was kind of a challenge, and you just keep going and going and going. Now, of course, you see a lot of bad, gross things. Nothing ever bothered me except for dead kids. I had to go to dead kid cases, and I didn't like that. And that's the only thing that ever really bothered me.
I can imagine, and kind of like you said, that's the scary thing, is when seeing such scenes like no longer cause like those initial reactions, right? Because you just become desensitized to it.
You do completely. I always tell people I could look at a mangled human body with the same passion that a mechanic looks at a broken transmission, because that's exactly, it's my job, and I'm in work mode. I have a power takeoff lever. When I'm in work mode, that's my mode. I don't have time to be emotional or upset. And if I am, I'm not doing the victim or their family any favors, right? It's harder for them if you get wrapped up in it. You just have to do your job.
Yeah, I can imagine that's incredibly tough. And that, and I know that's not the Well, one thing, it's not the view of this interview to do, but I'd love to perhaps do a follow-up interview, is my research for my dissertation, recent research has taken me into intimate partner violence and how,
Right.
especially with COVID, going on, that has just gone, blown up along with, alcoholism, which of
Oh,
course
of
is also
course.
highly tied with it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, perhaps on another time, because
Sure.
um, I think, from your experience, it sounds like you have a lot to offer on that, and also how it affects kids, or potentially, affects kids in a terrible
Right.
way.
Right.
Uh, so, wow. All right, cool. I mean, cool, not cool. But now y'all, now y'all have a
I
better,
understand what you mean.
yeah, right. It's always that, how to phrase it, because I'm so interested in this kind of
Mhm.
topics, and as are my students, and I think they're really going to appreciate this. And so the kind of topic of discussion for today, for all of you, is we're going to be looking at the case of Ali Mohammad Brown, a serial killer with radicalized you know, motives, to put it lightly, behind some of the killings. So it kind of crosses over between that domestic terrorism, serial killer. Really interesting case that Detective Steiger here had, was slightly a part of. So to kind of get this started, just, if Detective Steiger, can you please provide, brief recap on Ali Muhammad Brown's crimes that were committed, especially those that were considered acts of terrorism.
Sure. Well, my involvement in this case started on June 1st, 2014, when my phone rang at about 2:30 in the morning and told me that there was a homicide with two people down at 29th and South King Street in Seattle, which is an area known as the Central area. And when I got the call that there were two people dead in the street at 29th and King, the thought came through my mind, because this is an area with a lot of gang activity and gang shootings, that this was probably a gang-related homicide. That's what I thought. So I got in my car and I drove to the scene, and I arrived about 3:15, 3:20. And there were, of course, several police cars there, two young black males dead in the street. They'd been shot in the head and face. And I noticed that one of them was shot like once in the back of the head, but the other one was shot multiple times with multiple close-up shots to the face. I mean, you can tell that because the stippling from the gun was on the face. So the gun is no more than about 12 to 18 inches away from the face when it's being fired, probably closer to 12. And there were multiple shots to the face. Now, when you look at wounds or injuries to the face, that usually means something personal or kind of a rage, right? If you have, because the face is attacked, that's who you are. So if someone's attacking your face, it means it was either personal or they're in a rage about something. So anyway, again, presuming this was a gang-related shooting, getting information, we have crime scene people there doing the crime scene, saw multiple 9mm casings in the street, and eventually later that morning, I went back to my office, and what I usually do is I run the victims' names, because I want to get their most recent booking photos. So I have a photo of them in life. So when I'm talking to somebody about them, I can say this guy, and oh yeah, I know that guy, because sometimes they don't know their names. But when I did that, I found out that neither one of these people had any criminal history, which was surprising. And there was no question about their identification. They had driver's license and everything on them. So it wasn't like I got bad names. And so I started doing some more research and found out these people weren't gangbangers at all. They were something altogether different. And eventually the case went on where I found out that these guys were both gay. They were not together gay. They were friends who happened to be gay. Okay. And we did a bunch of stuff. We had their cell phones. We did what's called a dump on their cell phones that gives us information. First of all, whenever you have a whodunit homicide like this, you start going down rabbit holes. You get information, you think, this is it. You start following that. And then all of a sudden it dies. It peters out. You have to go back to the beginning and start over, and you go down another rabbit hole. Well, we were down 3 or 4 different rabbit holes in this one. But then I got the phone dump on it. I found that one of the guys had made a phone call a little after midnight on the night that you were killed. So I first of all, I tried to find what I could with the phone number, and I couldn't find anything on it. I ran it in different systems. So I finally just called the number, and I got a hold of a guy, and he goes, "Oh yeah." So this is like 4 days after the murder. He goes, "Yeah, I was with Dewan," which is this guy's name. He called me because he was at our place, which is a tavern on Capitol Hill, or a bar, and it's a gay bar on Capitol Hill in Seattle. And he goes, he wanted me to come down there. So he described how he went down there and met with Dewan. He said Dewan was with Saeed, and that's Saeed Ahmed, who was the other victim in this case. And he said, I don't really know Saeed that well, but he was over there. I know who he is because of Dewan, but he was over there texting. And he goes, I think he was on Grindr, and which is an app where gay men can meet other gay men. And they anyway, he said we were supposed to meet somebody. He told me we were going to meet somebody outside the bar when it closes. So they went outside the bar. There were a couple other friends with them. So the two victims and two other friends all went outside, and both the other two friends said the guy was weird. He said he had a look on him. I didn't know what it was. I was trying to be friendly, but he was kind of cold. And I thought that was weird. And then they offered these guys a ride home, but this other guy was going to go with him. And this guy creeped me out too much. I didn't want to go with him. So I said, no, I'll catch a cab. And those other two guys left. And then they said, yeah, they walked over to Saeed's car. Well, this is the first I'd heard that Saeed was in a car, because there was no car at the scene. The car drove away, but ends up they said, oh yeah, he was in a car, and they showed me where it was parked. And I went back and had sent people up there and got surveillance video, and I got a picture of the two victims and one other black male wearing a backpack walking on the sidewalk toward the car, although it was from behind, so you couldn't really see that much. We find this car. We'll put a bulletin out and find the car in Southeast Seattle. And within like 20 minutes of putting this bulletin out, a patrol car finds it. Well, this car and the rocker panels, there was just blood stain pouring out of the rocker panels. So that told us that this homicide happened inside this car, right? And that's the thing. So we had it towed, did fingerprints, and had it fingerprinted in the process. And they found a palm print on the rear passenger window. Rear driver window. There was a palm print on the glass, and they ran it through AFIS, which is the automated fingerprint identification system, and it came back to Ali Mohammad Brown. Okay, I didn't know Ali Mohammad Brown, but Saeed Ahmed was the owner of the car. Ali Mohammad Brown sounds like a Muslim name. Saeed Ahmed was definitely Muslim, so we called the family, because maybe it's just somebody that rode in the car one time, family friend. Just because you find DNA or a fingerprint at the scene of crime doesn't mean it's your killer. You have to show why it wasn't placed there innocently. And a perfect example would be a friend of the family had ridden in the car. They said they didn't know anything about it. So I start doing some research on him. I find out that he has been arrested before for funneling money through bank fraud over to like Middle Eastern groups like ISIS and things like that. So that kind of piqued my interest. And I thought that was weird. And then I found out he was arrested in Northern California just about a couple months before this crime, and he was driving a silver Dodge Durango. Well, later that same day, the county sheriff detectives who handle everything, the unincorporated areas outside Seattle, their detectives are only across the street from where our headquarters was. And one of them, a friend, calls over and asks, does anybody know anything? I have a homicide involving a silver Dodge Durango. And I went, what? What do you mean? So I called him back up, and I said, I just had a double. We know that he wasn't using this crime, but we know he has a silver Dodge Durango. And he said, I'm gonna come over. So he comes over, and we compare the casings on this computer. And I pull up the head stamps, and he goes, that looks like the same kind. And so when you get casings like that, you submit them to the crime lab, and they give you an opinion of what type of gun was used. And the opinion they gave me was a Smith & Wesson M+P 9mm pistol. And I asked him, did you get an opinion on the weapon? He goes, yeah, Smith & Wesson M+P 9mm pistol. So we called the crime lab and said, we want you to compare our cases to each other. Okay. A few minutes later, got a call back, same gun. Okay, now we're all on Ali Mohammad Brown. We don't, his guy was just walking down the street. He wasn't gay. His victim was not gay. A young black male walking down the street in an area called Skyway, which is just south of the city limits. He'd walk to the store for his uncle, and a car drives by and just shoots him like 10 times for no apparent reason and drives away. So we have that going on. And in the meantime, a couple of days, we put a bulletin out. It's on the news that we're looking for this guy for the murders. Well, I get a call from a detective in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey, which is on the Jersey Shore. And he says, we had a guy try to carjack somebody last night in our town. But he had a gun, he put it in the guy's face, but the guy, this guy had a stick and he didn't know how to drive a stick. So he got up and ran. And long story short, he says the guy was in a restaurant the night before and he ate and didn't have any money. So he had the waitress call his brother, and the brother gave him a credit card over the phone. He says, so I got that number and I called the brother today to ask him to act like I was talking about the theft. And he said, what was your brother's name again? He says, Ali Mohammad Brown. So he runs that and he says, and then I find out he's wanted for murder in Seattle. Anyway, then he says, up in West Orange, New Jersey, which is right across from Manhattan, near Newark, there was some kid just killed at random the other day. I wonder if it could be related. And I said, I don't know. So I got the number. I called Essex County Homicide Task Force in Newark, and they said, found out this 19-year-old kid home from his freshman year at the University of Richmond, went over to some friend's house, played video games, called his mom, says, I'm on my way home, and never showed up. And they got in call of a shooting in a very high rent neighborhood. This is not the slums. This is a $1 million home neighborhood. And they got there and there was nobody there, but there were casings in the street. And then they found this kid, his car a mile away in a parking lot, and he was shot dead and stuffed in the passenger seat area. And so I said, what kind of gun do you have? And they go, well, I think it's a 9mm Smith & Wesson M+B 9mm. I said, that's the same type of gun I have. And he goes, oh, this is just a robbery gone bad. We don't think so. Here's the deal. See, this is the thing with these guys are like Newark guys. They're all in Jersey. They have a lot of murders, but they're all gang murders, and that. So they think everything has to be that. They don't see. In Seattle, one thing, we have weird murders, right? I mean, we always have. We have Ted Bundy and Gary Ridgway and all the weird kinky stuff. But their only reference was gang murders and things like that, or robberies. So that's where they were coming from. And I said, well, when that whole robbery thing goes south, give me a call.
Well, and kind of going on that was how this victim was murdered. Well, one, talking about, victim backgrounds, was he also homosexual, or was it truly just random?
Well, no, only the first two guys were gay.
Okay, it was the only first two.
The others were not.
Okay, and were they all shot kind of, at least one of those first two victims, you said they were killed in what, obviously is usually indicative of a very, emotional, personal, or rage-fueled attack. Did you see that in any of these other follow-up?
Well, not really. But here, let me skip ahead and just tell you what was going on with the rage. Okay, Ali Mohammad Brown he used Grindr because anyone will go with you on Grindr, just about, right? So he knew it was basically low hanging fruit. He figured he could get somebody, and when he met Ahmed was a gay Muslim. And to him, that was an offense. He was he was very anti-gay, and so that was his shooting him multiple times in the face was his rage over Saeed Ahmed being a gay Muslim, and that's why it was different than everybody else. Everybody else was overkill on all of them. He shot except for Dwan. He only shot him once or twice. But see, he was just in the way. Ali Mohammad Brown was in the back seat of the car, and he shot Dwan first once in the back of the head. And then he was dealing with Saeed, right? And he drug them both out of the car and shot them both. In the other case, in both cases, the first case with my two guys, he drove away in the victim's car, okay? And in the case in New Jersey, he did the same thing. He shot this. He was waiting. He later told me when I interviewed him, he was waiting by a stop sign and just looking for a target. And his target has to be a a male alone. That's all that mattered. No children, no women, just a male, not an older male, a younger male alone. And when this kid, Brendan Tevlin was his name, pulled up, that's what he was looking for. And he just walked up and blasted 10 times into the car. Then he got in, shoved him over to the passenger side, got in the car, drove down the street, parked the car in the parking lot and left. And that was how this happened. And we eventually tied these all together through shell casings. And Brown, they were all the same gun. And they finally realized that this wasn't a robbery gone bad. This was a terrorist, and it was a serial killer. So I went back with a couple other guys back to New Jersey and interviewed Brown in the jail there. And he told me that this was his jihad, is exactly what he said. It was in retribution. He goes, why do you care about these two people? There are millions of people being killed in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. And he's trying to start the new caliphate. That's what he said. And we had a long conversation, and it was all recorded, where he made all these statements. And then I had to go back for a pretrial hearing in Newark. And then after that, he just suddenly changed his plea to guilty. And he goes, I'm pleading guilty. And he said during his hearing, because I killed those guys in Seattle too. So he pled guilty in there. And then he got brought back to Seattle, and he sat in jail because he wouldn't talk to any defense attorneys or anything forever. And he finally pled guilty in Seattle, and he was only actually sentenced last month in Seattle. He's been in jail, and now by now he's probably back in New Jersey serving his time there.
Wow. So, man, that's a lot. And I have someone in chat ask the question of kind of essentially what I'm taking from is there a reason why he was only targeting men, right? Because oftentimes, people see serial killers and it's going after women, in
Right.
the same sense of like alone. So what was it about, you mentioned he said it was part of his jihad.
Right.
And I want to kind of get into that whole kind of his whole background related, if possible. But yeah, why only men and not women?
Well, of course, when these serial killers pick women, they have a psychosexual motivation usually, right? That wasn't his motivation at all. His motivation was just to kill people. And I guess he felt some sort of honor in not killing a woman or people with children. He was just getting men who he thought were fair targets. He didn't think women or people with children were fair targets. I think, and then that's where his motivation was. I mean, he didn't have a psychosexual motivation. That's why he wasn't looking for women.
Okay, that makes sense. And kind of, I want to go on kind of a little bit in his background, right? So, we talked about how, was he born into kind of this, Islamic kind of extremist ideology, like, or what, did he learn it from someone? Because you mentioned, right, some research he kind of talked about, he was part of like a money scam with banks. Like, kind of how did he get involved into this ideology?
Well, he was born a Muslim American. First of all. His family was Muslim. And I kind of asked him that in a roundabout way during our conversation. I didn't say, when did you become radicalized? He said he'd always been a Muslim when he was younger. He didn't really, wasn't that much of it. I said, when did you become devout? That's the word I used. When did you think you became a devout Muslim? And what I was talking about was radicalized. And he said, I was about 14 when I really started taking it seriously. He had two older brothers that are also radicalized, and they were involved in the bank fraud things too. And he got arrested like when he was 18 for that. And so then he'd been arrested for rape of a child and some other stuff. And he didn't want to talk about any of that, of course. But he had no problem telling me that he was there to start the new caliphate, and bring peace to the world, is what he said, by killing everybody. I mean, I don't know. And he also talked about, he told me, oh, I didn't kill those guys in Seattle because they were gay. But then he went on to rant about men sleeping with men and it's unnatural and all this stuff. And he was like, yeah, he said, I didn't, that wasn't a hate crime, but it was.
Yeah, it's one of those. I'm saying it's not, but that doesn't mean
exactly.
It's not. Like
he says it. He said it kind of casually, but then he started going to this tirade about how outraged he was by it all, and the system and the thing going on. And then, he actually, I should have mentioned, when he pled guilty in New Jersey, he was also convicted and pled guilty to a state charge of terrorism, the first ever conviction of that crime in the state of New Jersey. So.
Wow.
Terrorism and murder, and then plus some robberies that he was doing robberies to get money, to support himself, and so he got charged with a couple robberies. He got life without parole in New Jersey, and then came out here and pled guilty to the 3 murders in Seattle.
Okay, I mean, wow! I didn't realize that was the first ever charge in New Jersey.
For a state. I mean, there's federal terrorism, but this is a state terrorism charge.
Yeah, state. So, and kind of, I want to link kind of this last question on kind of his whole background, is history when he was younger, is trying to link it with some other chapters we talked about in class. We recently talked about, strain theory, multiple ones, in fact. Is there anything, I don't know if you were made privy to about, when he was younger, like what we call, the removal of a positive stimuli, like, a loved one passes away, your parents divorce, or any introduction of negative, like, was there a, mentor who had negative effects on him? Kind of like if you remember the DC sniper.
Right.
Yeah.
He started here too.
Oh, hey, look at that.
He bought the gun that he used in a gun shop that's probably like 5 miles from where I am right now, and then he killed a woman in Tacoma before going back to DC. But anyway, his mentors, his parents, he never mentioned anything about his parents to me, but his 2 older brothers who were radicalized, and I met them. They were his mentors, and so I think they had a big part. They were never arrested or charged with any crimes. Well, I mean, they were involved in bank fraud a few years ago, but related to this, they were not charged with any crimes. But I talked to them, and they were pretty radical. And he had a sister that, because we were staking out where we thought he might be, and ended up his sister's place because that Dodge was seen in the parking lot, and his sister was pretty radicalized too. I mean, when we talked to her, yeah, she was shooting knives through her eyes at us,
Oh wow,
calling us infidels and all that stuff.
Okay, so, wow. But that's very enlightening. That kind of gets onto. So this is something that he was kind of being brought up in,
Right.
If,
I don't know if his parents or father was that way or not, because I think his parents are gone. So I don't know if they were, but he was really interested in going to restart the caliphate, and had to do that.
Wow. So it's okay. Well, and this is one of those things I like to bring up in my class is, when you hear things like this, is like, this is what they grew up knowing, right? And by no means does it excuse the crime, but it's all about, I told my students, it's about helping them understand. It's like, if you're being taught this from a super young age, then it just adds to making sense, right? Why that kind of mentality was even there. And I had another question from the chat is, do you know why they did not pursue the death sentence?
Well, there is no death penalty in New Jersey right now, and Washington decided not to for whatever reason. I don't know.
Okay. That, yes. Like I said, someone got a couple of people in chat very interested about these stories. Let's see. So we talked about the guns, kind of like how the shell casings were probably, would you say they were the primary link, or what allowed you to really link them between New Jersey, Seattle, and
because he used the same gun in all the crimes, and so that was a definite link. I mean, they were all matched. But we actually, when this was going on at first, once I learned about the shooting in New Jersey before they had admitted it might be related, I had our crime lab. I said, run those casings in NIBIS, which is a national ballistics database. And they did, and they told me the casings match the ones in New Jersey. They told me that. And then finally, when the people in New Jersey called back, who are great guys, by the way, I became friends with all of them. One of them, they asked to send us if we'd send some casings that way, and we said yes, and we did. And then they said, yeah, it's the same gun. They verified it. You know, you get something on a database, you have to verify it in person before it's for sure, because there could be flaws in the database, and they did. It was the same gun.
I see. How common is that to keep the same weapon, right? You know, because I'm sure
Well, it's
all
not
the
very smart.
yeah, I was gonna say, because I know all my crime podcasts and, you know, Netflix show aficionados, right? What's the Dahmer one? You know, they keep asking me in class about it, and I'm sure they're like, yeah, who would still use the same gun? You're supposed to like throw that in a river, like, you know, wash it, Clorox, you know, all fingerprints, and so.
Well, one of the problems was the way he got the gun to begin with is he married a woman, and she was originally not a Muslim, although he was trying to transition her, which was not her parents, who were very nice people, were not very happy about. But she bought the gun at a gun shop, and she claimed that he took it without her knowledge, but I don't know that that's true. I think she probably bought it because he asked her to. We could never prove that, so she was never charged with a crime. And then he had to, but it wouldn't be easy for him to get another one. He wasn't like the street culture where he would know where to go to buy a stolen gun or anything like that. One of the things that was interesting when he talked, he says he went back to New Jersey and went into some mosques, hoping to find people, like-minded people, because he wanted to make his way to the Middle East and join ISIS. But he goes, when he got to the mosques, they wanted no part of it. He said, you got to get out of here. You know, so
Wow.
Maybe they thought he was an undercover agent or something. I don't know, but you know, they kicked his butt right out. I mean, yeah, you can't be here. Get out of here.
Yeah. Want nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with that. Yeah, because they know it's going to bring down all the stuff it's going to bring down on them, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's and that's something else you talk about is stigma and labeling, and it's how people look. If a case gets sensationalized, then guess what? That's your entire group is now lumped in together with that.
That's exactly right. They didn't want anything to do with that.
Yeah. So, okay. And the whole, I guess, regarding the whole gun purchasing, was it all, you mentioned he got arrested for like child molestation or rape of a minor.
Yeah.
Was that, I guess, clearly on his record? So that would have prevented him from buying a gun.
And the bank fraud too. The bank fraud.
And the bank fraud.
That was a federal bank fraud charge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he was ineligible to purchase or possess a firearm. He also got charged with that, but I mean, in the big scope of things.
Yeah, that's a smaller one.
The least of his worries. Yeah.
Right. So, and you said, you know, working with it in the courthouse, you know, kind of seeing him and seeing his trial. Did he ever show signs of, you know, change, you know, like no longer feeling or wanting to be affiliated with, you know, ISIS or any other, you know, of these terrorist organizations? Did he feel remorse?
Well, when he was sentenced here, and I think in New Jersey too, he got up and said that he was stupid and what he had done was stupid, and he kind of apologized to the victims' families, although, you know, that's pretty shallow at this point. There's nothing you can say that's going to make them accept your apology. But he did say he got wrapped up in it and out of control, because this time he's been in jail for 7-8 years, right? 8 years he was in jail. He had a lot of time to think, and I don't mean prison, I mean jail. And let me tell you what, especially in King County or Seattle, I'm sure, and I know it's the same in Essex County, 1 year in jail is like 10 years in prison, because you're trapped. There's no outside. There's no, you don't have all the things you have in prison. You're just in a cell, right? And you know, you have the common area, but it's a lot longer spending time in a county jail than it is in prison. Life is much more comfortable in prison.
Wow. I did not know. So students, if you're picking your crime, make sure you know.
Yeah. Don't have one you're going to sit in a county jail for 5 or 6 years. And that happens all the time with murders.
Oh man. So let's see. So quite the interesting case. Like, have you looked at other cases similar to Ali Mohammad Brown's in your, you know?
Well, I was looking for, I mean, just
All
have I ever, I was looking for other cases because he traveled clear across the country,
Mhm.
on Greyhound buses. And he had his gun with him the whole time. So I actually sent a bulletin out through all the federal systems. Said, are any local murders involving that sound like this? Because we know he traveled from Seattle to New Jersey on a Greyhound bus, and he could have done things along the way. I haven't found any others. As far as have I ever handled any other cases like this? Not really. I mean, I not really, no. I mean, I've had dealings over the years, and not in homicide, dealings with people, sometimes radicalized people, but not to this extent.
Okay. Wow. So interesting. Like, so this is kind of, would you say then this is indeed like your first, kind of like, not, I know you've worked serial killer cases before, but like your first terrorist oriented.
Well, yeah, this is a completely different animal. Is a jihadist serial killer. It's not, most of your serial killers, like I said, are psychosexual motivation, right?
Right.
And this is a completely different animal. And it was great experience dealing with it, and getting up to my elbows in it. And so, yeah, and talking to him, I learned a lot talking to him. We talked for quite a while. Unfortunately, I had to talk to him in the jail, which is I never want to do. I wanted to bring him to the police headquarters area, but they didn't want to. They said he was too dangerous. Maybe you should call the police.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I've had people facing the death penalty in my interview room. I don't think it's so. But anyway, I wanted to, but because the problem in the jail is there's no good facility, and every time you start talking, the PA goes off. We're going to sell Block B, and it interrupts you.
Yeah. Yeah, oh man, I could see that being a major issue. Yeah, any sort of interruption. And regarding kind of like your interview interrogations with him, is there, what can you say, if at all, like about kind of his mental state, like how it perhaps changed over the times that you talked to him? We've kind of talked about his beliefs, but just as far as it relates to other killers or even serial killers,
right? He wasn't. He certainly was not insane. Let me start. Okay. He was completely sane. And when I went into this, my approach was, I think you had a message, and you're trying to send a message. By that time, I'd already figured out it was jihadist type. And I said, I need to know what was the message. If you want to say it, if you're going to send a message out, you have to be able to stand up before men and tell them what your message is. And I intentionally said men, because that's what he identified with, not people. And at first he kind of hemmed and hawed, and he said, I'm not trying to make boast about anything. And I said, it's not about boasting. You had a message. You're trying to send a message. What's your message? You have to be a man and tell everyone your message. And that's when he got it. And that he finally just started telling me his message.
Oh wow! So so kind of egging him.
Just because if you're going to do this stuff and you're trying to say something, here's your chance. Say it. What do you have to say? And like I said, he hemmed and hawed a little bit, but then he finally just started getting into it, telling me what his message was.
Wow, that's very interesting. So I'm always curious to hear, like, we talked a little bit, it's been a while, kind of about your just interrogation tactics in general, like how to pick at the ego, especially if they're like sociopaths or psychopaths, right? I know that's something that's always talked about.
I've talked to a lot of psychopaths over the years, and I teach interview and interrogation. Interrogation is one of my talents, I think, because I can, first of all, I'm a fairly quick wit, and I have a good memory, so I can come back with things quickly. And then during sometimes these things last 3 or 4 hours, and someone could say something in the first half hour or 40 minutes, and then say something completely different later, and I remember it, and I say, well, that's not what you said earlier. Oh yeah, it was. I said, no, it's not. This is recorded. Do you want me to play it? Because when you're telling the truth and recounting actual events, it's easy to just say what happened. You just go through it. And no matter how many times you're asked, you'll say the same things. There might be slight variances, but basically, the facts are the facts. But when you're when you're lying, you're making it up as you go. And especially in a 3-hour or 4-hour conversation, you forget what you said before because it's just too hard. It's a lot of work to lie like that for hours. And so that is part of interrogation. You just sit there and unreel the rope,
Right. Yeah.
Let them tie it around their neck, and that's what you do. You just have a conversation, for hours, and then they trip up and they say stupid stuff that the evidence shows isn't true. And usually, most of the time, it leads to a confession, but not always. You don't need a confession for it to be good. All you need is an absolutely provable lie. Mm-hmm. That's good enough,
Well, and because this is obviously a different case, but I did watch the Nick Cruz, the was it Parkland High School, but school shooting, and his I saw most of his interrogation, and kind of what you're just saying was he essentially talked himself into trouble because when he got arrested, he said demons told him. So immediately, right, now you have to psych eval, see if it's, truly insane, or is it just, bluff, making it up to try and get off, which he definitely was, because the interrogator, starts slowly being nice, and he started opening up. And it's exactly like you're saying, right? The more lies you build, it's hard to quickly recollect, like, all right, what lie did I use to cover up that lie?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where you get them. It's patience. It's you're kind of a poker player, right? You're looking for the tells, right? And they do have tells. When they're lying, you get the long blank, or the rubbing their head constantly, or the leg bouncing up and down, And after a while, and I'll point it out to you, that's a sign of deception, what you're doing right there. And oh no, it's not. And they'll try real hard not to do it, but they can't stop.
That was it subconscious, just
exactly.
or whatever you call it.
Exactly.
Oh man. Wow, that's man, that'd be cool to go more into, but this is so this was a case that you've kind of finished up towards the end of your career, and definitely took you all over the place. Was it California, Seattle? Is there anything else you'd like to kind of talk about with regards to the case, or kind of like the criminalistic tendencies that Brown kind of exhibited towards just his MO? I mean, we already talked about targeting men specifically, using a handgun.
He wanted to kill more. I mean, that was his idea. And he said he was hunting. It was basically hunting these people, and he would just look for an opportunity and take it. And so, I mean, he did a lot of robberies of people, and it's fortunate he didn't kill any of them. He was really after money at that point, but he was kind of, like I said, he was on the run, and people don't realize it's a lot harder to be on the run than you think, right? They ended up getting arrested. He was found sleeping in the bushes behind this house, this multi-million-dollar house that overlooks the Hudson River and right across from Manhattan. And he was sleeping in their bushes, and they didn't have any idea he was there, and he'd been there for your camp, and they found him. Patrol officers just happened to be looking because they were looking for robberies, and they go, let's go check these areas here. And they find him laying there asleep with a gun in his pants, because he probably would have, I'm sure his idea was to, commit suicide by police at the end,
right?
Go out in a blaze of glory. But he got caught sleeping in the middle of the day too. So, that's because he's out prowling all night.
Right. So, and that kind of, as we get close to wrapping up, is just that whole, he was committing these acts in, pretty broad public, right? Just waiting by, were they mostly all at night, to improve?
Well, the murders were at night. The robberies were not. Robberies would be in the middle of the daytime, because, more people out. He'd walk up to somebody, get in their car and stick a gun in their face, take all their money, and, and then he'd run up into the woods, which is where that house was, up this hill, and then the other side there's these huge mansions overlooking Manhattan, and he'd go hide in the bushes at their house, So, and these people are living their life not knowing this psycho guy is sleeping in their bushes,
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because that kind of dawned on me. I was curious, stop sign, man, these are huge public, but night obviously makes a lot more sense.
Yeah,
Nowhere
yeah.
near as many people.
It was about, when he killed the kid in New Jersey, it was about 11:30 at night. And like he
Okay.
did the ones in Seattle. He met him at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it was about 2:20 when he killed him. And then the other guy was at night, the kid walking from the store. That was probably about 11 o'clock at night also.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So, I mean, I think, thank you. That's been a fantastic, kind of accounting of, the story. And I know I definitely enjoyed it. I think my students will absolutely enjoy it, kind of getting to hear someone who was on the ground actually working the case. As we get, just about here kind of wrapping it up is, do you have any other personal thoughts or suggestions on the cases for the students?
Well, one thing about this case, if you're interested, there's a lot of stuff online about this case and this guy. This was national news when he killed this kid in New Jersey, because at first they kind of thought the kid was involved in some nefarious stuff, and it ends up he was completely innocent. And then of course that shocked everybody's conscience. And so it was national, and then they tied it into this, and it was all the national news people did stories on it. There's a lot of information online, a lot of video, and about his sentencing and stuff.
Wow. Okay. So it's, definitely. So y'all, if you want to look up more of it, then there's plenty to see.
When you Google his name, you'll get a lot of Muhammad Ali stories.
It's like, wow, this murder was a boxer, and he's pretty
boxer,
good. Why did he throw it all away? Wow. And is it too early to ask this newest book you're writing if it's over a certain case or?
Well, I have one main case and then 2 or 3 other more minor cases, and the main case is a serial killer again that was in Seattle. This was in the early 70s. This is how bad things were then, and I see kind of a similarity now, where we're, instead of victim centered, we're defendant or suspect centered. And this guy committed 2 violent rapes against women in Seattle and was convicted. And instead of being sent to prison, they sent him to Western State Mental Hospital to a psychopath recovery program they had there. And actually, it's kind of interesting because a mutual friend of ours, John Lieberman, who's a forensic psychiatrist. He was doing his residency and was part of that program, and he remembers this guy. And he said this guy should never been there. Well, he walked away because they give him all these privileges. He walked away and ended up, over a period of, murdering 2 young teenage girls in Seattle before fleeing, going down to Oregon, raping a 13-year-old and all this stuff. And it's just kind of how the criminal justice system let the victims down by believing you could treat psychopathy and sexual psychopaths, believing you could treat them, and you really can't. You only try to control their urges, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up a good question, because I know there's been an increase, I don't know if you can say increase, but emphasis on kind of, I guess, these similar kind of clinics are that focus on psychopaths. But I think by and large, it seems kind of like a lot of things, like if you try and fix it or change mental state, especially when you're adults, it's not going to really take any effect. They're like, maybe for kids, if you can identify them as children.
Yeah. If they're on that way, yeah. But by the time a person's an adult and offending, they're locked in. I mean, that's who they are. That's their being. Mm-hmm. It's like, you're not gonna, all the counseling in the world is not gonna change them from that. I mean, that's who they are.
Yeah. Okay, great. I was curious. Yeah, when you mentioned that, I was kind of curious with more of your knowledge on that. So fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to,
No.
Well,
that's pretty much it.
All right, everyone. Well, again, very, happy, grateful for, like I said, retired homicide Seattle police detective Cloyd Steiger, good friend, nice guy, and hopefully, get to see you soon with those cold case organizations, which I know y'all will. All you students are going to be looking forward to getting those back up and running, and hopefully we can
Absolutely.
get some conferences back up and going. So with all that, Cloyd, thank you again so much. I really do
Sure thing.
appreciate it. This was fantastic, great information. The kids are going to love the quizzes I make out of this. So this is
Don't give me, I'll fail.
yeah. I love it. Well, Cloyd, if there's nothing else, then yeah,
Okay.
again, just thank you so much. I hope to
Sure
be in
thing.
contact soon and just stay in touch.
You have my number.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Cloyd.
All right, Cloyd. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. Bye.
Sure thing. Bye.